I want to tell you about two men I know, both decent, both emotionally aware, both exactly the kind of men women say they want. The first one, I'll call him Marcus, was the guy every woman in his circle turned to, the one who picked up at midnight, who sat there for 2 hours listening to her process some situationship with a guy who wasn't even worth it. He drove her to appointments, remembered her coffee order, showed up when nobody else did, and never once pushed for anything back. He genuinely thought that's just what decent men do. The second guy, I'll call him Jordan, watched Marcus for years, and around early 2025, he made a very different call. He started quietly pulling back from certain female friendships, not all of them, specific ones, the ones where he was always present but his needs were basically invisible, where he gave emotional energy freely but reciprocity was always just slightly out of reach. Here's the thing, both of these men hit 2026 carrying completely different emotional realities. Marcus was exhausted. Jordan was, and this is the word he actually used, clear. And honestly, that's the whole point. Because what's happening right now across dating culture, across male psychology, across how men are structuring their social lives, it isn't random. It isn't misogyny in a trench coat pretending to be enlightenment. It's something more specific, more psychologically honest, and genuinely uncomfortable for both sides to look at directly. So let's look at it directly. Let me start with what most people get completely backwards. When women hear men are pulling back from female friendship, the immediate read is, oh, he just wanted to sleep with me, and since that's off the table, he's taking his ball and going home. I get why that interpretation exists. Honestly, it used to be accurate for a lot of men. Research has long shown that women tend to experience opposite-sex friendships as genuinely platonic, while men often have a harder time fully switching off attraction in those same dynamics. That pattern is real, documented. But that's not what's driving what we're seeing right now. Not primarily. What's actually happening is something deeper, and both sides need to hear it without getting defensive. There's a concept that a Stanford researcher named Angelica Ferrara put a name to, and when I first read about it, I had to sit with it for a while before I could write about it honestly. She and other researchers theorize an increasing and unequal dependency on close bonds with women in response to the collapse of men's social networks, through something they call mankeeping, the labour women take on to fill the gaps in men's social lives and reduce the burden of men's isolation. Read that again. Men's loneliness is increasing because of a steep decline in communal spaces, social rituals, male friendships, the things that used to hold men together, and as a result, women, friends, co-workers, acquaintances, end up absorbing that emotional weight, often without support, often without acknowledgement. So here's what's actually happening underneath these friendships. Men are lonely, genuinely lonely. Their male friendships are thinner than they look. Research shows men tend to open up about emotional stuff to wives, mothers, sisters, platonic female friends, partly because they assume male friends won't be helpful. And young women are increasingly taking on a disproportionate load of invisible emotional labour because of it. Many men described feeling weird or like a waste of time opening up to other guys, so they save vulnerability for the women in their lives. And those women, they describe that dynamic as work. Now, here's where it gets complicated, because this is the part both sides always misread. There are two completely different men responding to this, and they're going in opposite directions. The first type, the Marcus pattern, genuinely cares, shows up, gives, is present. But he hasn't examined why he keeps landing in dynamics where he gives everything and gets nothing emotional back. He tells himself it's generosity. Sometimes it is, but sometimes, if he's being honest, he's using female emotional intimacy as a substitute for something he hasn't built, an actual support network of his own. He's comfortable being the helper because it gives him access to emotional depth that his male friendships just don't offer. Compared to women, Men often have way less experience communicating openly about their feelings, needs, expectations. Women build those skills through their friendships, men don't, and that's a real deficit. So the friendship Marcus offers is genuine, but it's also filling a gap for him. And when that gap gets filled through a one-directional dynamic, eventually something breaks. The second type, the Jordan pattern, looked at that same dynamic and made a different calculation. He noticed that in certain friendships he was functioning as an emotional support system without anything coming back. He noticed, if he was being honest, that some of those weren't really friendships at all. They were him being useful. Research backs this up. Women tend to provide increased emotional support to men who don't have it elsewhere, and they experience a real burden when that labour isn't reciprocated. But here's what nobody talks about. The inverse is also true. When men are the ones absorbing emotional labour without reciprocity, always the support, never the supported, they accumulate a burden too. They just don't name it. They just slowly stop showing up. Now I want to get into the part that makes this genuinely complicated, because there's a psychological pattern underneath male-female friendships that neither side tends to be honest about. Men are, on average, more attracted to their female friends than vice versa, and more likely to think their female friends are attracted to them, which research describes as a clearly misguided belief. Men feel more attraction to their female friend than she feels toward them. Men overestimate how much their friend is into them, and men's desire to date their female friend doesn't really change based on whether they're already in a relationship, whereas women report less interest in dating a male friend if they're already partnered. So what does that actually mean? It means the emotional stakes are often genuinely different for each person in these friendships. The woman might experience it as completely platonic, warm, mutual, supportive. The man might be experiencing something more complicated underneath, not predatory, not manipulative, just a different emotional reality that he might not even fully admit to himself. Research found that men were more likely to see romantic potential in a female friendship as a benefit, while women primarily saw it as a cost. And when friendships didn't turn romantic, men often felt rejected and used. And here's what I think most people completely miss. Some men in 2026 aren't rejecting female friendship because they can't handle platonic connection. They're walking away from specific dynamics where they gave emotionally, received emotionally, but were never on equal footing about what the relationship actually was. And after enough of those experiences, some of them are doing what women have been advised to do for years, are protecting their energy. That's worth sitting with. Here's where the two worlds fully split. Marcus, after years of being the emotionally available friend, starts noticing something. The women who call him constantly, they have romantic partners, other friends. He's one slot in a support system they've built thoughtfully for themselves. But he's also the slot they call first, the one they call late, the one who absorbs the emotional weight their other relationships can't hold. Married men often offload emotional labour onto their wives, who then offload onto friends. Support becomes a chain, and Marcus, in his friendship, became a link in that chain without anyone asking if he wanted to be. Jordan, on the other hand, started asking himself a question that took him a while to even articulate. He asked, what does this friendship actually cost me versus what does it give me? Not in a transactional keep score way, more like, is this mutual? Does she value my presence? Or am I just available and useful, and she hasn't had to think about the difference? And when he got honest about certain friendships, the answer was uncomfortable. Therapists have a term for this role, the emotional husband. The person who fills all the emotional intimacy needs that would typically be met by a romantic partner, without actually being in that relationship. You're the one they call first with good news and bad. Jordan realised he'd been occupying that role in at least 2 friendships without ever agreeing to it. And when he stepped back from those dynamics, something interesting happened. Neither woman noticed for almost a month. You already know this, you just haven't said it out loud yet. Some of these friendships aren't friendships, they're arrangements. They work because one person is available and emotionally generous, and the other person is comfortable with that without ever really examining it. And they fall apart, or quietly shift, the moment the available person starts asking whether the arrangement actually serves them. This isn't a male problem or a female problem, it's a human problem. Humans take what's freely offered. Humans fill the gaps in their lives with whoever shows up. And when someone builds their emotional life around a person who never officially agreed to that role, it creates something that looks like friendship on the surface, but functions like something else entirely. Young women are increasingly pushing back against the expectation that emotional labour is just part of the deal. Once expected to absorb that labour as normal, they're more aware now of the real costs, including suppressing their own needs. That awareness, that clarity about what emotional labour costs and what it should require in return, men are arriving at that same place, later than women, less fluently, with less language for it, but they're getting there. And when they get there, some of them draw a line that looks, from the outside, like rejection. It isn't always rejection. Sometimes it's just a man finally doing the math that women have been doing for years, realizing that not every warm connection is actually mutual. Not every person who leans on you really sees you. Not every friendship that costs you something gives you something back. So what does this actually mean for how you show up? If you're a woman watching this with a close male friend, honestly ask yourself something. Do you know what this friendship costs him? Not what you give him, what it costs him. Do you know whether the dynamic between you is genuinely mutual, or whether he's absorbing something you haven't had to think much about? If you're a man watching this who's been the Marcus, always available, always present, always the support, ask yourself why. Not with judgment, with real curiosity. Because sometimes that role comes from genuine care, and sometimes it comes from something you haven't examined yet. The point isn't that men and women can't be friends, they absolutely can. Emotionally healthy platonic friendships built on mutual respect, real boundaries, honest communication, those are genuinely valuable. That's not up for debate. The point is that any relationship, friendship or otherwise, that runs on one person's emotional generosity without the other person ever really seeing the cost, isn't a relationship, it's an arrangement. And eventually the generous person figures that out. Marcus figured it out too, 18 months after Jordan and with considerably more pain. But he got there, and when he did, he didn't get bitter. He didn't reject women. He just got honest about what he was willing to give and what he needed back. He started building male friendships that could actually hold emotional weight. He stopped filling everyone else's gaps at the cost of his own. He became, honestly, a much better friend. Just to fewer people, and with much clearer eyes. That's not a rejection of female friendship. That's someone finally understanding the difference between connection and service. And the moment you can tell those two things apart, in any relationship with any person, everything shifts.